when I was 5, I was in Prince Alfred Children's Hospital here in Sydney, and I was thought to die. I was there for 12 weeks, no diagnosis was ever made, and every day they wheeled my bed out into the lawn, and I could feel myself going into the ground. That's my first memory, is at the age of 5 being pulled into the ground. And one day, as my mother was leaving, I could see she was going to cry, and I was going to cry. I turned on the radio at the hospital, and there I heard a particular song. I looked outside, and I saw some particular paintings on the wall, and I changed. Now, and that was a spiritual change. Now, many years later, through Owen Potts, I discovered how many people, how many spirits, I use the word spirit as distinct from soul. Soul is within us, spirit is out there that comes into us with reincarnation. And the overwhelming feeling was that something had happened to me. I didn't know what. My mother said that I was extremely agitated and nobody knew. Many, many years later, I discover that I was already had many spirit guides coming to me, as I've told me many years later, including one man called Norton Manning, who some of you may know because he was the director of Gladesville Mental Hospital here, among many, many other things. And he came to me, as he says, through Owen Potts, when I was 5. Is there any wonder that I got the Norton Manning Prize for Psychiatry? Psychiatry was a joke. I knew it all. By the time I was 12 or 13, I had read Freud and goodness knows what. And when the new professor came, we'd go into a clinical group into his office, and after the first week, I was not allowed to talk until all the other students had said something. Then he turned to me and said, "Well, Diamond, what's the answer?" And it was so easy. It was like I knew all this. I'd done it before. And I've discovered since just how many spirit entities I've had from before and so many since. Now, try to understand this. I and my wife Susan have studied, I studied a lot, 3-4 times a week with a psychic healer in New York and some others before that and some others after that. That was very, very intense, but that was psychic healing. Owen Potts was a psychic medium, a connection between the two worlds. And so I first came across him through my wife Susan, who was already living in England. And she'd had a number of readings. I had some readings when I was living in London, about 1989, 1990. The first time I walked in, he didn't know anything about me except my name, Diamond. I sat down in his little office in South London. He said, "Well, I can see you're a doctor, but most of what you do is talking." And he said, I see the stars and stripes, but I hear the Australian accent because I'd lived for 20, 30 years then in America. And then he said, "You do acupuncture because you're a Chinese guide." Now, I was hooked then and there, and I spent, as did Susan, a number of hours with him. And every hour was what I call the Aunt Bessie type of reading. And it's always pretty strict for an hour or so. You want to know about your money, you want to know about your health, you want to know about your marital life, your job, etc., etc. The usual stuff. And then one time I'd moved back to America. I went over to see Owen again, and my mother came through, as always. She directed every session, open and close every session after she died. And she said, "Remember the 14th. Now this was on the 5th. The day we left London was the 5th of October. But the 14th was her birthday. And so I was meditating. I said, "Well, what's your message for me on your birthday? What's your birthday gift to me? And she said, do it a different way. Your message on earth is to find out who you are and why you are. Who you are and why you are. And I realized that's the secret thing. You are an emissary from, not of, but from, of the spirit world, not from the spirit world. And your purpose of life is to establish links between the two worlds. So I called Owen Potts on the phone and I said, what do we do about this? This is completely different to what you've done. He said, it's different to what I've ever done. He said, let me meditate on this. He calls back a few days later. He said, okay, I'll take the two of you on. Now, this has never been done before. Let me get to the end. We have spent something like $1.25 million on research with Owen Potts. Think about that. How many trips, sometimes from Australia, other times from America, over to London, staying at these damned expensive hotels and going there for a session or two. And then I said, this is so unproductive. We want the whole day, 5 hours, and not only the whole day, we want a week or two. So we would go over there and spend a week or two, many, many times a year, right up until he died last year. Now, here's the research. This has never been done before. No one else has spent that much money and that much dedication for so long on 3 parts. My wife, and especially with Owen Potts. It's been, just imagine it. Now, and all of it was recorded by me and written up by me at the time. We have stacks and stacks of records, stacks and stacks of it. And later, I would then summarize every session as well. But we're talking about 3, 4, 5 sessions every day for 2 weeks or more. That's a lot of time, and it's a lot of interest on the 3 of our parts, and it's a lot of resources. A lot of resources went into this. It's never been done before. If you want to do parapsychology research, start here. What are you guys going to do with this? What are you going to do with it? This is parapsychology. This is how we met in the first place. I called you up and I said, what do we do with this? You said, well, give a talk here. Well, here I am. What the hell are you going to do with this? Parapsychology research. We're not talking about poltergeists. We're talking about spirit guides that are controlling our lives. And so these are, so every day I would be meditating and I would go through a list in my mind of the guides that we had, which was early on 30, 40, 50, imagine that. And now it's 500 or more. I've had over 1,500 hours with him, 500 or more guides when they came through to me when he was alive, and I had a number before he died, but since he died and has been pushing me from the other side, I've had about that same number myself. Everyone written down, everyone researched. Now, and I've got a whole room and more, virtually floor to ceiling, of books written by and about my spirit guides. There's so many of them. Here are some of them. What am I going to do with all this? I'm 83 now. What the bloody hell am I to do with all this? It's time you guys did some work. That's why I'm here. It's time you did some work. Parapsychology research, here the hell it is. What are you going to do? Reincarnation? I can tell you reincarnation. How many do you want to hear about? How many do you, okay. Where will I start? Okay, so, there's so many. I'll tell you one. Anyone heard of Yan Hui? It's in Chinese, as in the old system, Y-E-N-H-U-I. I can speak freely? Okay. Yan, so he comes through, Yan Hui. And so, who the heck is Yan Hui? So I looked through all my books of ancient Chinese, and I have many, many, many books now, many books. And he was a disciple of Confucius. And he died young. And it said, and Confucius cried for 3 days and nights because his favorite disciple had died. Now, where the heck does that come from? Now, let's be clear. Some of these people I know, Paracelsus, and I've got many of them, but Lister, so forth. But so many of them I have no knowledge of whatsoever. And neither did Owen. He was not, in that sense, an educated man, and he was very, very dyslexic, wasn't he, sir? Very dyslexic. And he wasn't a reader at all. Now, so so then I get over time Confucius, Socrates, Plato, recently myself, Parmenides and Empedocles. I first wrote without knowing anything about it. I wrote about Empedocles at my 48th birthday talk, and I'm now 83. That was long before I got caught up with that particular aspect of the spirit world. It was just so much. Let me talk about Grodek. Okay. Well, Grodek, in many ways, is the closest psychiatrist to me that I know. And Michel O'Donnell, anyone heard of Michel O'Donnell? He's still alive. He did a lot of work on natural birth. And he said that Grodek was a matricentrist. He put his own mother first and everyone's mother, which is what I've tried to do over the years. And every session I ever had after she died, Owen Potts would say, "This session's gone on long enough, but I can't stop it. Your mother has to tell me when to stop." He said, "I'm getting tired. This has now gone an hour and a half. Where's your mother?" There she is. She's come. And then we could stop and have a cup of coffee and come back and do some more. And every session was started by my mother. He said, she's opening the door, she brings them in, and at the end, she leaves. And one time, I was going to go to a conference in Baden-Baden, which is where Grodek had practiced his form of psychiatry. And he said, of course. He said, I've got Grodek here. Now, Grodek was very involved with the desire for the disease. And my work for so many years has been so many years. I can go back and think about this 60 years before. We all start, every disease I've investigated, when you go into the unconscious, into the deeper aspects of the unconscious, there's always the desire for the disease. What is the desire for, where does it come from? Now, Paracelsus, who is a major guide with me, allegedly, says disease starts in the mind. And Grodek would add, the mind that wants that particular disease. Why do you want a sore throat? Why do you want a headache? Why do you want ulcers? Whatever it is. Where's the desire? And that's what I learned from Grodek. Now, isn't it strange that I was born in August 1934 and he died, was it February or March 1934? That's just coincidence. And then just, there's so much. For example, when I was, my first work at Prince Alfred Hospital, I had a very unusual experience here. I was 3 years in and out as a patient at PA in preclinical years. I was 3 years as a medical student there and virtually 3 years as a doctor. And I don't think anyone else has had that particular plan, as it were, tuition, all the way through. And everyone was so angry with me for my last exam, the last year, because I came 20th in the year out of 200, and I virtually went to no courses at all. I ran a hi-fi shop because I thought music and everything was more important, and I thought, what are they teaching me? This is not what matters. And back then I knew. So here I am. I arrived at Prince Alfred. My first job is as a resident in neurosurgery. And I'm there only a week or two, and there's two men, both 24, both paralysed from the waist down as a result of motorbike accidents. And they get the same hospital infection. You know, hospitals like to give infections. And in a week, one was cured and the other was dead. And I said to the supervisor, what happened? He said, well, some have got it and some haven't got it. So I thought, what is this it? And that's what I had when I was 5. I discovered, as it were, this it, this healing power within us, this healing power within us, which later another guy who was Cholden talked about, and so on, and so on. And Grodek wrote a whole book. Grodek wrote a whole book, the Book of the It, it's called. This power, years later, this power within us to heal us or not, depending on what is deeply within us. I can just talking on. There were years later, in 1961 or 62, I discovered a psychiatrist now dead called Lewis Cholden, a young man who died in a tragic car accident. Very, very wonderful young doctor. And there's a video of him done by Orson Welles not long before he died. And there was this, Cholden is there day after day, week after week, working with a very, very disturbed mute woman. And he just sits there the whole time with his hand out like this. And over a long time, she eventually comes, takes his hand, he opens it, and she starts to talk and went home. And Cholden taught me, this is only a few years after he died, in 1956, and he said, all is creating a place of safety. If you give the patient a sense of safety, then the healing power, which I call the it within them, can do something. If the healing power isn't there, if they don't feel safe, nothing happens. And about that time, I was given to discover about Paracelsus, who was saying virtually much the same thing. And now I'm just free associating, but there was, at that time, I looked up the number of people who'd been killed by bone pointing, not over here, bone pointing, right? And I discovered all the ways in which they had investigated criminals, particularly in India, who were being talked into death, criminals, and dying. And I had so much respect for this power within us. And it's all basically coming from this poor patient who died, and this Grodek and Paracelsus. Paracelsus talked about the Archeus a long time ago. So these guys are with me all the time. When I'm working, they're there all the time. I'm meditating for at least an hour and a half or more officially, and then bits during the day since, for years and years. And they just come through, as they came through with Owen Potts. Now, I just at random, I picked this guy up. So I've had at least 70 Japanese painters come through to me. At least 70. None of which I knew. And I came across this book, and Owen Potts, out of the blue, would come up with their names. And from nowhere. Then I'd have to look up and see if I could find. Now, think of this. He said, I've got Izumo here. Izumo? Who the hell is Izumo? So I look at this book, not a common book at all, and here it says, Izumo flourished early 16th century, a sculptor, a carver of no marks. This name, indicating was an artist, together with the date 1508, is found on the inside of a no mask belonging to a particular no theatre. That's it. Now, where does that come from? I've got quite a few guides who are back in BC, way back in BC, in their own country. For example, painters on cave walls. Painters on cave walls. Now, what's fascinating about them is you say, well, were you paid for what you do? And they don't understand the question. Like one man says, we would paint with ochre, but when it wouldn't stick, we would cut ourselves and stick it with the blood on the walls. But I'm trying to say, is your activity like painters today? It's secular. Is what you were doing, as it were, sacred, or is it secular? They don't understand the question. There was no difference. They just did what was being given to them to do. But by the spirit world, that's just what they did. There was no separation of the two worlds like we have all the time here. Okay, so the essence of all my work with Owen Potts really has been what I call the Euripidean challenge. Now, Euripides was the greatest, I think the greatest playwright ever, certainly the greatest of the early Greeks. And his last poem, his last play, which was only produced after he died, was called Bacchae. And in that, there's a wonderful scene where he is challenged by a relative who's a god. You don't know who you are, and you don't know why you are. And I don't know how I get any idea of who I am and why I am, why I was doing psychiatry, why I did this in psychiatry, why I did this with marriages, why I did this here, why I did everything. You're laughing, I wasn't, but I am now, but I wasn't then. But so it is just, why are we doing these things? Why are you here? Why is that guy doing this work? Why is this one doing that? Why am I doing it? Why the hell am I talking to you now? It's just as it's supposed to be. It is all just as it's supposed to be. And yeah, this is what Susan has written down for me to say. The main gift I received by this whole project was that I received an answer to what I call the Euripidean challenge. Who are you and why are you? From Euripides' greatest play, the Bacchae. It helped me to understand my life and to help me overcome the fear of death. One of the most important aspects of the work was bringing through my mother, who was still very much involved with me. The message she gave was that I am an emissary of the spirit world, not from the spirit world because I'm here, but of the spirit world. And in summary, we miss Owen greatly because I don't have this opportunity anymore. I don't have this opportunity anymore. We have tried some other psychic mediums, and they're very interesting, and some of them are very, very good. But I don't have another $1 million+ I don't have another 25+ years. I don't know what the hell to do with it. So I talked to this psychic, and that one, and sometimes we just went to visit two psychics in Scotland at great expense, and it's very fascinating. One came up with a name that I know from a long, long time ago called Theophan the Recluse. Has anyone heard of him? No, he was, so where does this come from? He was a Russian Orthodox priest. He lived most of his life in a cell and had very little communication, it was a hermit, as it were. And people would write to him for advice all the time. And everything every reply was the same. Stand before God with your mind stand reverently before God with your mind in your heart. Right? And I feel this with everyone I work with, and I've used this for years with, as it were, with people at the back of my mind. This is long before Owen Potts, long before this woman I was with just recently. And so she just starts to meditate, and she says, I've got this man who was obviously Theophan, the way she described him and everything. And then we're just with another psychic again in Glasgow. You just remember, spiritualist churches in Glasgow are very common and very respected. Very respected. And so this woman, as she's leaving, we just had a conversation. She said, you've got someone who died in a motorbike accident. And he was riding a Triumph motorcycle. So what the heck is that? Did I remember the story I told you about the man with the it who died? And I wrote a whole paper about how this man didn't die in vain. And so I sent it to her. But it just, all I can say is there is this spirit world. It's just everything. Now, my guide. What was it? Oh yeah. So one project I had, unfortunately fairly late in our relationship, he was 89 when he died, was to ask people, what was the passing over like? What really happened as you passed over? And for example, Blake said that he saw all these colours. And then the most important one that stood out was blue. And it became deeper and deeper and then was gone. And he was gone. And Liszt said he heard music and music and music, and it got quieter and slower, and it passed on. And I've done a lot of work with music in many, many ways, including the tempo at which it should be played. And just a short year or so ago, my father came through with Owen and said, that's your father guiding you. Because he used to be a jazz pianist in Sydney when he was young. And about, good heavens, in the 70s, I was driving home about 2 o'clock in the morning, having worked a lot with a very disturbed man. And I was concerned with him maybe dying. Well, he's still alive and doing well. And I remembered as I'm driving that when Boris Pasternak was dying, Shattersdorf Richter, the pianist, for 17 hours played the piano for him till he passed over. And I was thinking this, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, driving, and I got this strong message of the Sibelius Second Symphony. Anyone know Sibelius? Second Symphony? Well, I've always regarded it as the greatest of his. And I thought of the fourth movement, and which I know very well. But it's always worried me, because near the end, the strings are very, very loud and very prominent. And then in one bar, they become very soft and disappear. They come back a little bit later, but with none of the power that they had before. It's like something, I felt something changed. So he comes through many times with Potts for various reasons I won't go into now, about his personal life, which he says, I understand, and he thanks me for how I've helped him to understand what his personal life was on earth and why he did what he did. We've been to his grave and so forth, his home. And I asked him, I said, why did you make this change there? He said, is that what you meant? He said, that's exactly what I wrote. And then when he came through the last time, comes through many times, the last time I asked him about passing over. He said, well, you know. And he said, I was conducting the Second Symphony. Now, he did very, very little conducting. Only one little recorder, did very little conducting. So I was conducting the Second Symphony, which in life he never did. And I said, and when did you pass over? He said, you know, it's a place when the strings die. Now, what am I to do with that? What am I to do? And there's just so much. So let's just look at a few guides here. Well, I have quite a few. So about, must be like 30 years ago or so now, I started to paint. Now, I've never been able to paint. I can't draw an apple if my life depended on it. But all of a sudden, a bit more than 30 years, I started to draw some things, not people, things, symbols if you like. And then about 25 or more, about 25 years ago, I started to do this quite a lot. And I was using Japanese ink, Japanese brushes, and just regular paper. And I did something like, I think my secretary says 20,000 of them or something. And I still do them, all sorts of shapes and sizes and good knows what, every day. And many, many, many. And when my Japanese friends look at it, they say, this is Japanese. This is Japanese. Now why not? These are the Japanese artists that I know of through Owen Potts. And there's about 70 of them. Now, and there's quite a number of Chinese guides that go back about 1,000 years before most of these Japanese. And they were called from the Southern Sung dynasty in China. And they were very respected. They were called literati. They painted, they painted, and they wrote poetry, a lot of poetry. I have an old book about some of them over there. And they were also, many of them, very concerned with rocks. They loved rocks. And there's a special word in Chinese and in Japanese for the love of rocks. In Japanese it's called gonshi. And where's that rock I gave you? I clipped on that side. Go and go, can you get it? Good. And so I've got thousands of rocks. I collect them everywhere. And I keep saying, stop calling to me. Stop making me pick you up. And recently a doctor came to he wrote to me after, he says, you've got so many rocks. And he sent me a poem written by one of my guides called His Love of Rocks. I said, well, I know all this. I know that guide. He's telling me to do it. So this is one, I just found this just out here. Look at this. Look at, you can't, what? You've lost it already? Anyhow, so it's just everywhere. And everything is sort of calling to be recognized. Every rock, every twig. And that's the Japanese and the early Chinese. You see? And so these early Chinese were very involved just with form. Almost no colour. Occasionally a little bit of red, but almost no colour at all. Just black on white, as it were, the yin and the yang. Yeah. And then about 1,000 years later, the Japanese artists who were getting pretty upset with how the Japanese art was becoming more and more formal and formalized, said, let's go back to the early Chinese artists, and they call that movement Nanga, N-A-N-G-A. Ga means painting, and Nan is their word for southern in China. They're going back to the Southern Song school of painting. And that's the Japanese art, and there's a whole lot of Western art as well. Oh, but so many. It's been an incredible experience. And so one day, Owen Potts usually say, I've got this guide, I've got this Japanese painter here. I look up in the book, and he didn't have access to the book. I look up in the book, and here I find this guide, this Japanese. I know nothing about him. And so here we are. Most of the pages in this book now have got marks in them where they occurred. There's just so many. And then, well, yeah. Do you get the idea? It's been a lot of fun. If you want to put it in a lot of work, if you want to see it the way, but it's been a lot of fun. And I talk to these guys every day. I've now reduced the number I actually talk to every day to about 70. But then others keep saying, what about me? What about me? What about me? Now, I'll tell you about, remind me a minute, Sue. Over the years, I've used very few regular doctors. There's one, I've been to see him, is that better? Been to see him once or twice myself. Susan, my wife, has been to see him a few times over the years. I've sent odd patients to, or not odd, but regular patients to him and I have also these 3 guides that I knew in life that were very, very, to my thinking, very big in medicine. One was Ainsley Mears. Have you heard of Ainsley Mears here? Yeah, okay. Well, Ainsley was a dear friend of mine and colleague and so forth in Melbourne years and years ago. And Ainsley has been coming through to me for a long time. Then there's Robert Fulford, who was the greatest of the cranial osteopaths. And there's also Hans Nieper. Have you heard of Hans Nieper? He was probably the most important, at least a few years ago, in nutritional medicine. He was in Germany, but a lot of time in America and Australia too. And they say, we are the Three Musketeers. We come to you together. And one day, about 20 years ago, on my way to see Owen Potts, I was in a hurry, I was in London, of course, and I didn't have time to meditate. When I arrived there, they said, you didn't think of us this morning. I said, you're right, I didn't. So every day I think of them. And every day I know that with those 3 worlds, I have virtually everything I need. And the guides behind them, and the guides behind them, and so it goes on, and so it goes on. And so they said, we are together to guide you. And we are the Three Musketeers. I said, and I'll be the 4th. He said, you are the 4th. You are the 4th now, but later you'll be the 4th up there. And I can't wait to get, why the hell am I, why am I here? I could be up there. But this is, I'm serious, this is ridiculous. What I could be doing up there. And so one of them said, and one came through very soon after dying, which is pretty rare, because Potts says it takes a lot of energy for them to come through to Earth. That they have to sort of put on other clothing and come down. It's very difficult. And they say, no, you are here. This is very important. You are here doing on Earth what we want done. They're all here because there's certain aspects, like Sibelius, there's certain aspects of his work which isn't done. There's certain aspects of all these painters and so on that hasn't been done, and they want me to push it forward in a certain way. Not as they did it, not because that's been done, but as they might have done it if they were around at this time. Might have done. And one day, one of them said, "We are never more than an inch away." So every day, I think of less than an inch, as I did just before I started talking here. Less than an inch. They're always there. And they said, I mentioned before this doctor that I refer patients to, and they say, "We are also guiding him." And I said, "Well, you know, I'll know him, I'll tell him." They said, "It's no point in telling him. He doesn't want to know." And every time I call up, not about a patient, but to say, "Let's have a cup of coffee," he always says, "Too busy." It's as he's not supposed to know. And this has been one of the tragedies. I've had quite a number of people come through whose sons or daughters are still alive. And I say, "Well, should I talk to your son?" They say, "There's no point, he wouldn't be interested." And the wives, the same thing. I've never found one who said, "Yes, please do that." They said they wouldn't be interested, which I think is so disappointing. Change the subject. Mention Euripides. How many translations do you think there would be of a Euripides play? A lot, right? And so, and I said through Owen Potts to Euripides, "Well, who's the best translator?" And he says out of the blue, "Kenneth MacLeish. There's no other." Now, Kenneth MacLeish, I've always valued as a translator of ancient, particularly many other languages, but particularly ancient Greek. And he comes through and he mentions Kenneth MacLeish. What am I to do with this? Okay, Homer. Want to know about Homer? I told Homer the whole Iliad was one line. The spirit that was Homer. And he, as it were, says he agrees. You can take this or not. This has nothing to do with me. It's them, I think, talking through me. You don't have to accept it, but I think it's good stories. So, who has read the Iliad? Okay. Now, the essence of the Iliad is that Euripides is not a very nice man. Achilles is not a very nice man. And he just kills people. He just likes killing. And eventually he gets killed himself through a particular weakness he has. He has one spot in his body which is vulnerable, and that is his heel. That's why we talk about Achilles' heel as being the weakness. We have a president at the moment in America who's all heel. That's another story. And so the problem, why the heel? Well, here's what happened. The first line of the Iliad says, "Sing, O muse, of the wrath of Achilles, the son of Peleus," Peleus was virtually his father, and virtually hardly appears in the 26 books at all. But his mother was a goddess, and she had the opportunity to give him eternal life. All she had to do, like herself, was to dip him in the river Styx. If she had dipped him properly in the river Styx, he would have been immortal. But she forgot to dip his heel. And I thought, when I heard this, I kept thinking back. She used to get ice cream here in New York, which was a double dip. Remember? McNibbin's double dip, if you're old enough. And I said, why didn't she double dip him? And I said, if she had double dipped him, he would have lived forever and he wouldn't have been so damned angry with his mother. And so, so I said that the first line should be, sing, O Muse, of the wrath of Achilles, the son of the son of Thetis. And Homer says, you're right. Now, is he flattering me? I don't know, but it's an interesting way to look at it, isn't it? So just a double dip. Read just a little bit about the Iliad, and just particularly the Barry P. Powell translation, which is another story. But just read the first line and consider if only his mother had double dipped, there would be no Trojan War. How different we would be today. And I keep thinking, I don't want to say this too loud, what happened to our American president? He should have been triple dipped. Right. So there we are. We can go on and on. What have I not done? Oh, okay. And so I should tell you, I've done so much art over time, and all of it has been done with what I would call a guided intention. And just to summarise that, a long time, Sir Oliver Lodge, you've heard of? Right. He came through a long time ago and said that I am in a semi-trance. I know what he means. I don't know what I'm doing. But when I go to Japan, or sometimes when the Chinese come to me, they say, this is Japanese, this is Chinese, because it's what they would have done had they been around now, I think. So, what have I not said? Oh, there he is. Look, there we are. And we go to the end. And there he is saying goodbye. I could cry. Goodbye, Owen. Now, here's Jim. This is Jim. Remember someone before talking about Jim? Tim.
That's Owen going back to his office.
That's Owen walking. He's not dead. He's walking to his room. I'm behind him. But there he is. No, I've got to stop. I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
Okay, that's enough. So, thank you.